everyone and welcome to my end of year book tag. I will be honest, the last part of this year has flown for me. Not for great reasons, which we'll kind of go into, but I didn't even click that it was the end of this year until I kind of saw this video popping up on my feed, and I'm also very late to this video because it kind of is really about the transition from summer, I guess, to autumn and winter, and really it's just, I mean, we have snow now in York. We are in winter, and I say we have snow, we had a bit of snow and now we just have drizzle, which is fine. But we are gathered here today to the end of the year book tag created by Ariel, and I feel like this booktube tag has been on, I feel like I have done this tag so many times over the years, and so I feel like it is a staple now, and I thought what a better way to kind of have a catch up than to do a nice little tag, some easy questions for me to answer. Where shall we begin? I guess with a question. I can also really hear the wind coming down my chimney because I've always been like in like flats and things. I've never had like actual wind coming through my chimney, but it really makes me feel like I'm in Wuthering Heights. Like I can hear the wind off the moors. I mean, I guess the North York moors. But it is very cold at the moment and I am slightly freezing at all times. Actually, I should point out my book club jumper. Join my book club. If I ran a book club, I would never attend it because I'd never read the books in time. But anyway, let's get on to a question. So the first one is, are there any books you started this year that you need to finish? And the answer is yes. And this book, I think, brings you with me on this journey that I'm going to talk you through. And the book is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. And if you watched my last video, I filmed that video quite a few weeks before Halloween. I talked about reading Frankenstein in that video, and these are the Livebound classics that Ben and I bought for our anniversary. Frankenstein's one of Ben's favourite books, and I wanted to read it. And I wanted to read it before Halloween, and especially before the adaptation of the film came out. And I started reading it, but my dad became critically ill just before Halloween, and he remains in hospital. And what I will say is that Frankenstein is not the book to be read in intensive care. And so I put it down until now, and now I'm reading it. And that kind of explains also where I have been mentally. Ben and I unfortunately have had a pretty rough year for stuff, family, and there's nothing that puts you off reading than that. Like, it just doesn't. I don't know how anybody else can think about anything else when things like that are happening. Reading has not been on the top of my to-do list for the second part of this year, which is really sad because there are sadder things than me that we have to read a book. Now I know. But I had a great start of the year with reading, and in some ways it was going to be a really, really positive year. But I'm kind of now going into the winter after having a pretty shit autumn. And so I kind of couldn't bear to look at Frankenstein for a little bit because of it, but I am now reading it. The good news is I am loving it, and I think one of the reasons that I kind of took so long to really get into it, apart from obviously everything going on, was also the fact that I did not like this book when I studied it for GCSEs or my undergrad. And reading it now, and I have to say I am actually also listening to it as an audiobook. The reason I have these editions was because these are our anniversary editions, but Ben and I were going to annotate them and read them together, and that hasn't happened because I haven't had the mental capacity to actually read, like physically with my eyes. And I have found the way into this to be audiobooks. And actually I never speak about my love of audiobooks, but I listen to audiobooks constantly. I never don't have an audiobook on the go. It's actually, I think, my favourite form of reading, I have to say. And so I am so grateful to have audiobooks as an option because it's enabled me to actually get into Frankenstein. So I am kind of holding this just as a bit of a gimmick because I haven't read this edition. But this is obviously a special edition for Ben and I anyway. And I think I will go back because I've kind of been making notes in my head, and I'll probably go back and annotate this a little bit. I am loving the structure of the novel. I am loving the link to the Rhyme the Ancient Mariner, which is one of my all-time favourite poems. And I'm remembering so much from studying it that I loved, and I'm excited to do some extra reading around it and really think about it and analyse it as well. And actually that's another thing. If people think that, number one, if people think that audiobooks isn't reading, I really hate those people. But I also think there's a lot of people who think that if you listen to something on audiobook, you can't analyse it. And I also just don't disagree, because you're engaging your brain while you listen. And every time I've been listening, I've been like, well, that's interesting. That's an interesting like move. Like, why is this, you know, is this linked to this? And so even though I always, when I listen to audiobooks, I tend to then go back, I kind of bookmark, and then I go back and annotate it in the actual book. You're still engaging your brain. But anyway, we can have that conversation for a different day. Just to be a bit annoying and mess around with the structure of this tag a little bit, there is another question, number 5, which is there a book that could still shock you and become one of your favourite books of the year? And without a shadow of a doubt, it is Frankenstein. And even though I haven't finished it, I'm pretty certain this has now become a favourite of the year, but also a classic now that I love, which is so nice, because I used to, I wouldn't say hate, but I would say dislike. And I also felt a slight bit of shame, because I feel like I think I would like it. And it wasn't because I felt like it was a classic and therefore it had to be liked, because I really don't subscribe to that kind of thinking either. But I really felt deep down that I am a kind of person who, on the outside, not gothic at all, you know, like a sunbeam, if you will. In my heart, darkness festers. And so I always thought it was really strange that someone like me would not like Frankenstein. Turns out I do. So I am still a goth at heart. But I am really glad, because Bennett's for years, for our, you know, almost 10 years of being together, he's always told me how much he thinks I'd love it. And he's right. He's right. I do love it. I really am just going to mess with the structure of this tag just a little bit, but I will put the actual questions in the description. So if you would like to do it, you totally can do. But there's another question about what kind of free books do you want to read by the end of the year? And I don't necessarily know if this is going to be a book that I read by the end of the year, but I wanted to talk about it because after my last video, everybody was telling me I had to read it. And it is Romantic Outlaws, The Extraordinary Lives of Mary Wollstonecraft and Mary Shelley by Charlotte Gordon. I really wanted to include it in this video because although I don't know if this book is going to get read by the end of the year, but I wanted to say that it is now very high on my to-read list, and I think that when I finish Frankenstein and I finish my other biography of Mary Shelley, I will almost certainly become fixated and read it anyway, or read a part of it anyway. But I've never had this many recommendations for one biography before, which I think speaks volumes of how many of you loved it. This is the perfect example of why I really think of my shelves as a personal library, because I always go back to books that I either haven't read, I always return to them. Like, I never keep any book that I think I just genuinely won't read, and I nearly always read quite a few books that have been on my shelves for like at least 2 years. I do tend to have about a 1 year waiting time for me to read a new book, which I know is not ideal, but this book has been on my shelves since my masters. I think I bought it in either 2016, 2017 when I was studying a lot of Mary Wollstonecraft, and also did a semester or class on the Romantics. And because I thought I would potentially write about Wollstonecraft when I was doing my dissertation, and I didn't in the end. But yeah, I need to get around to it, and now, might not be this year, but it is definitely way higher on that TBR, as I say. So thank you for that, but I wanted to include it to be like, don't worry, I've got a copy. I can read it, and I will. Because I've heard, yeah, just glowing reviews. The second question of this tag is there a book to transition you into autumn? And obviously now I'm really, it's winter. I am transitioning, I have transitioned now to winter. I realise a lot of this video has crossed over to my last one, and I apologise for that. Sometimes I do worry that my videos are like, it's Brontë, it's Austen, it's Virginia Woolf. And then I'm like, but that gives me joy. Like, if it gives me joy, surely there'll be someone out there that wants to hear me talk about Emily Brontë or, you know, any of the books again and again and again. Because I think if you love them, you love you love hearing about them. So anyway, let's go to Emily Brontë. So obviously there was Frankenstein, and then also Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights, also in my leather-bound edition. Wuthering Heights for me is the perfect end-of-year book because you transition through so much, even within the pages of this novel, and you begin at the end with hope and the start of a new year and a new life for the characters within it as well. And so this is going to be one of my next reads, and in fact, in the other question about what the books I need to finish by the end of the year, it is of course Wuthering Heights. Another book that will take me through to the end of the year is 15 Wild Decembers by Karen Powell, and I bought this on my very first trip to Haworth this year, and I have been desperate to read it. And I bought it in January, and I just feel like I didn't want to read it. I don't know how much December really features. I'm guessing there's 15 Decembers in this novel, but I really wanted to keep it until the winter months, until December. And this is a historical novel from the perspective of Emily Brontë, and I've heard so many wonderful things about this book, and I feel like when I first heard about it, I was slightly trepidatious because I thought, who can write as Emily Brontë? But apparently Karen Powell can and does beautifully. And I did wonder if any of you want to read this book with me. That might be a nice kind of bit discussion point, especially when I'm also going to be reading Wuthering Heights in December too, so we can kind of combine a reading of them. So let me know if anyone's interested, but I'll definitely probably be talking about this more when I finish it. I've got a few more books that I want to read before the end of the year, but because of how life has been, I feel like this list would normally be a lot longer. Or I would be way too ambitious because I'd feel like I had all the time, all the energy in the world. But I don't this year. I just don't. And so I have kept it small and kept it to the necessities, which is sad because I really wanted to do a big reread of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Noel this Christmas. But it's not going to happen. I am going to stay on a classic that again I mentioned in my last video. You might as well just go and watch that video. Probably be more interesting than this one. But it is Mansfield Park by Jane Austen. I'm reading this because me, Lena and Ariel are buddy reading Jane Austen books ahead of us going to the Jane Austen Festival, and we're going to be having one copy and annotating it, so we're going to be swapping, and I need to read Mansfield Park for January. Wish me luck, because I feel like life is slightly against me at the moment, but I really am excited to read Mansfield Park. I've also got my classic University Norton Anthology, not Norton Anthology, Norton Critical Edition, and I am obsessed with Norton Critical Editions, and I've decided recently that I've been scouring Vinted for so many of them that I either had in university or just newer editions of them, of my favourite classics, because I just love all of the notes at the end of them. It will be really interesting reading Mansfield Park for pleasure, because the last time I read Mansfield Park was for an essay about Wollstonecraft and Jane Austen, looking at her views of religion and sensibility and how it links to the betrayal of Fanny in the novel. So that is like, yeah, I'm excited for that. I also, because of this, have decided that I'm going to whip out Claudia L. Johnson, who in fact I think does she also does the introduction to this and the notes to this edition of Mansfield Park. But if you love Jane Austen and you like critical studies and literature, you have to read Claudia L. Johnson. And I bought this book on Vinted because I studied, this is Jane Austen, Women, Politics and the Novel. This was like a mini Bible for me during my 18th century MA, and I always wanted to own a copy, but it was always really expensive, but I found it on Vinted. And so I'm going to read this and then continue my annotations. Over the last few months I've also been sent some proof copies of books linked to Jane Austen that will be relevant for me reading Mansfield Park. The first one is Courting Disaster by Zoe McGee, which I can't remember if I talked about, but this is published by Manchester. In fact, both of these are published by Manchester University Press. And I've read Courting Disaster and I really enjoyed it. It is a study of consent in 18th century writing, Regency writing, and I found it so interesting. But there is a chapter on Fanny Price in Courting Disaster, so I'm going to reread that when I am rereading Mansfield Park. But there is another book that actually I haven't read yet, which is Wild for Austen by Devoney, a rebellious, subversive and untamed Jane, looking at kind of how Jane Austen, because the one thing I love about Jane Austen as a writer is I think over the years we really have put her in a certain box of respectability and of politeness as well, when actually I think as a writer Jane Austen can be, like, politeness in 18th century is something that I really enjoy studying, but also just in the nature of who Jane Austen is, she does challenge quite a lot of things in her writing, but I think we have slightly made her way more prim and proper. I'm really interested in kind of like the perception of Jane Austen and how it's changed over time, because there could be criticism of, you know, people just think of her as bonnets and frills and nothing else, but when people talk about like things like that, it often like makes those things that are kind of feminine more frivolous. And then I think there's a lot of internalized misogyny in that kind of view of that actually it would be okay if it was about frills and ribbons, and if it was a romance that would be fine, that has worth too. And so I think there's definitely elements sometimes of internalized misogyny in thinking about the criticism of Jane Austen, but then there's also an element of sometimes where people read things that maybe aren't there, you know, like the girl bossification of like female figures in history that actually are not girl bosses but actually were terrible people, or in fact aka Margaret Thatcher. But like there's a few different things that I'm just like that, yeah, I find it interesting. Because of that little ramble, I am interested to know who her Jane Austen is, especially in regards to a novel like Mansfield Park that does mention slavery, and I feel like it's always a topic that I'm like, whenever I read anybody writing on Jane Austen, I'm always like, what do they think about that scene in Mansfield Park? And I kind of like to see how critics kind of respond to that kind of moment. But this book looks at wildness in lots of different forms, kind of wild character, times of revolution, and kind of also going against the standards of the time, whether it's, you know, Lady Susan or whether it's Fanny Price in Mansfield Park. The next book that I want to read before the end of the year is really an author, because it's Agatha Christie. Agatha Christie is one of my favourite writers, and I often do tend to read her mysteries in the wintertime, because that is for me a murder mystery time. It's a time to get cosy and to commit a little murder. This year I've picked the ABC Murders, which is actually a recommendation from Katie at Books and Things when we had the Booktube York meetup, and I don't know anything about this book, but she recommended it to me and I trust Katie. Ever since I read And Then There Were None, I have tried to read Agatha Christie either on Christmas Eve, so starting on Christmas Eve, or on New Year's Eve, because there's nothing better than having like the last thing you want to kind of complete before the end of the year be an Agatha Christie novel. And that kind of feeling of like tension of like I've got to finish it, especially when I'm not a fast reader at all, so it really does feel stressful. I think I might do that for the ABC Murders. But yeah, let me know if you have any recommendations. The last book is very different, and it is Iron and Flame by Rebecca Yarros, which is the sequel to Wuthering. And this book really symbolises annual leave. This is my time off over Christmas. I am excited to have an out of office on, to sit in one spot and not move until I finish this book. I want to have a day off just to sit and read this with no interruptions. I read Wuthering at the beginning of the year, and I loved it. Like, I bought it because I was feeling sad and I just wanted to sit down and read a book in one afternoon, and I didn't think I'd enjoy it. I kind of thought, oh, I'll just get it, and I devoured it. And this is going to be a good time. And so allow me to have a good time. I've heard good things about it. It is nothing serious, but I will be obsessed with it. And I think when I read Wuthering, I didn't even speak to Ben for the entire day, or like days, because I was just in this world. And this year especially, that's what I need. I need some time not in this world, just a momentary pause, if you will. And this is what this book represents. The third question on this tag is, are there any new releases you're still waiting for? And the answer is yes, but they've all come out. That's kind of how it's been this year, is that I have several pieces of non-fiction that I'm really looking forward to read, and they're all hardbacks, but I don't think I'm going to read them this year, but I think I'll either purchase them either as hardbacks in the sale, because Waterstones often has a really good hardback sale. I don't know if it will this year, but that's kind of why I've left some of my history hardbacks. I also buy the majority of my books secondhand, and so I obviously have to wait until these new non-fiction releases kind of get to the point where they are available to buy secondhand. But on my list is Thomas More by Dr. Joanne Ryan, who is, if all these people actually really like their writing, but she wrote one of the best books ever on the Dudley family, and I loved her writing so much, and so I am excited to read a dedicated biography of Thomas More. The next one is another brilliant writer. Tracy Borman did a book about Elizabeth I and the end of the Tudor era with the Stolen Crown. I find myself reading Tracy Borman's books really quickly, and so I think I might buy that in December and read in early January. And then I also have an 18th century book that I want to read, which is Queer Georgians by Anthony Delaney, who is one of the hosts of After Dark, the history hit podcast that I'm obsessed with. I love podcasts, and After Dark has just been a really great... I only started listening to it this year, and so that's been a really kind of great one for me to find. And there are so many books that either they themselves have published or that they've kind of mentioned that I have on my list, but Queer Georgians is pretty much up there for me, especially because I've had a very 19th century year this year. Apart from, I mean, I haven't read any 18th century books apart from, have I read any Jane Austen? Did I read Emma this year? I can't even remember what I've been reading this year. For me, Jane Austen fits into the long 18th century, so I kind of include her in that, but actually it really has been a 19th century year, so maybe I'll go back and have a bit more time with the Georgians in 2026. We have now arrived at a final destination, the last question on this tag, and it is about the reading plans that I have for 2026. If I have any, what are they? And I do. The first one I've already mentioned is the fact that I am going to be buddy reading Jane Austen with Lena and Ariel. We are reading Persuasion, Northanger Abbey, and of course Mansfield Park. And I'm really looking forward to reading that and annotating that and then swapping, and also the Jane Austen Festival, which of course will mean I read a lot more Jane Austen and Jane Austen related things in September, so I'm looking forward to that. Another book that I think I wanted to mention a while ago and kept forgetting, but I think actually it's the perfect book for me to save properly until 2026, and it is the beautiful country commonplace book by Miranda Mills, our very own Miranda Mills. I started looking into this when I first got the book as we were turning into autumn, and I loved it, and it made me feel so cozy, and it also just kind of helped ground like in nature, and also you know how like the seasons have been going on since the beginning of like time, and you know I always think that Anne Boleyn had an autumn. Like I know obviously seasons would have looked different over the years. Obviously climate change is a thing, it is a real thing, but sometimes I like to think that when I read great poets writing about winter, I'm experiencing a winter too. And the connection that I think that literature has with the natural world and therefore has with us is so beautiful. And so I'm excited to read this because I really love Miranda's videos, and they are for me a cozy place to find myself. And so I'm excited to read her kind of moving through. I'm excited to move through the seasons with Miranda in a way, in the same way that I do with her videos as well. And it's just really beautifully put together as well. The design of this book, the colours, just everything feels really well thought out, which of course is exactly what we would expect from any book that has a Miranda's name on it. But this is going to be something that I will definitely feature in the future as I move throughout the year. And I always love, and I've taken so many book recommendations from her, especially over the last 2 years, and so I'm really looking forward to the different lists and the poetry that she's included in this beautiful book. In terms of my other reading plans, I am just going to let the year guide me, because in 2025 I almost had a set reading list of things I wanted to read. I knew I wanted to you know, film my video about Mrs. Dalloway and the Brontes, and I knew I wanted to host a month for Brontë, and I wanted to read Anne of Green Gables in Canada, and all these kind of different things. And so my year was quite structured, even with the fact that I knew I wanted to read, you know, Frankenstein for Halloween, all these different things. I had like a definitive list for every season, and I don't really, apart from Jane Austen in September. And so I'm excited to what the new year kind of has for me, both in terms of life and in terms of reading, because I am excited for the new year. I don't want this to feel like really negative, like I'm so glad 2025 is over, because in fact it's going to be a really beautiful time, I think, when 2025 ends, because it could have ended so differently in so many ways this year, and for that I am very grateful. And of course I'm grateful for you here watching this video with me and still being subscribed. If you're not subscribed, please consider it. But I am grateful for all of you still being here after many gaps and videos about the same books every single month. But thank you for watching, and I really hope all of you have a wonderful winter season. I'm really excited that the next video I'm going to film is going to have my Christmas tree in it, and I'm excited to share winter in York again with you and Christmas, and I want to do another Christmas vlog, so there's truly so much to look forward to, and I look forward to taking you with me. So thank you for watching. If you are at the end of this video with me, please choose a emoji of hope, or something that brings you joy. Pick an emoji that brings you joy, maybe one that you use a lot with a friend, maybe one that you just never use and in fact would love to get a bit of joy out of using. I feel that way about the whale emoji, or the animal emojis that I just never use. Sometimes I just pull them out with my friends just randomly, because I then kind of worry that, you know, when you have on your iPhone, if you have an iPhone, you have like the list of emojis like you're frequently used. I then get really sad about the emojis that I don't frequently use. All the emojis I've never used. Sometimes I like to go through and be like, I've never used that one, just use it, just so I feel like it's fulfilling its purpose. So I either do that, or just pick something that you love, and makes you feel good in an emoji. And it'll be nice, because it will be cool to see everyone's different emojis. Like when you say autumn, when, you know, they're so specific, but I love that I might get some wolves or a gorilla or an alarm bell, I don't know. But thank you. I will see you very soon, and I'm going to leave this video because I've ended it 5 times, which is, I'm always like that on the phone. Like I never, as soon as I'm like bye, I then start a whole other conversation, as I'm doing now. So I'm going to go. Thank you for watching. Bye!